Have you ever sifted through a handful of pennies only to pull out one that stops you in your tracks? Where that shiny little coin suddenly looks like a treasure chest key. Today, we're on the hunt for those hidden gems you might be overlooking in your jar of spare change. We'll dive into three seemingly ordinary pennies from 2006, 1984, and 1995 and explore what makes each one a standout in the world of numismatics. Stick around, because you might just rediscover your pocket change. Let's kick things off with our first star, the 2006 Lincoln penny. At first glance, it's easy to pass by, still sporting the familiar Lincoln Memorial on the back and that tiny date on the front that you hardly notice. But dig a little deeper, and you'll uncover a fascinating twist. You see, after 1982, pennies were made mostly of zinc with only a thin copper plating. So the 2006 cent you find in circulation is 97.5% zinc. That shift in composition means that any minting mishap, doubled dies, off-center strikes, die cracks, becomes even more intriguing for collectors hunting for error coins. Historically, the Lincoln cent has been America's most ubiquitous coin since its debut in 1909. But the zinc pennies introduced in the early 80s added a new layer of interest. In 2006, the Philadelphia Mint, no mint mark, and the Denver Mint D produced perfectly average runs, until a few slipped by with remarkable errors. The most sought after of these is the double die obverse, where parts of Lincoln's profile or the date show overlapping images. A well-graded example of the 2006 D double die sold for a cool $1,050 at Heritage Auctions in 2023, proving there's serious money to be found in these small mistakes. But the excitement doesn't stop at errors. Even pristine, error-free specimens can fetch impressive sums when they achieve top grades. According to PCGS, a 2006 Lincoln penny graded MS68 in red by a top grading service realized $2,640 at auction back in March 2020. That's a far cry from its face value of 1 cent, and it highlights how condition can dramatically influence worth. In everyday terms, if you find a 2006 penny that's been clinking around in your pocket, it's probably worth just its 1 cent face value, unless it's uncirculated and perfectly preserved, which might push its value up to about $16 if it earns a mint state grade from a professional service. But stray into error territory, and you could be looking at anywhere from a few hundred to a few $1,000s, depending on the severity of the doubling, centering, or other anomalies. Now, before you rush to dump your change jar onto the kitchen counter, here are a few quick tips. First, check for doubling around the date and the words "In God We Trust." Often the doubling shows up most prominently on the lettering or Lincoln's cheek and jawline. Next, shine a light on the edge of the coin. Off-center strikes reveal a bit of blank planchet peeking out, another error that can be surprisingly valuable. And finally, don't dismiss die cracks or planchet lamination flaws. They're small imperfections, but can spike a coin's appeal for error collectors. So, what's the story behind this? The minting process for zinc pennies involves high-speed strikes of planchets that are thinner and softer than their copper predecessors. When a die receives even microscopic damage, that flaw transfers to every subsequent coin, creating die cracks. Similarly, if a die accidentally shifts or the planchet feeds under two slightly misaligned dies, you get that dramatic doubled image. It's a perfect storm of modern minting quirks that, for us collectors, is pure gold. Well, almost. To sum up this first leg of our journey, the 2006 Lincoln penny may look unassuming, but its zinc core, combined with modern minting techniques, produces a playground for errors. A flawless MS68 RD example can command thousands at auction, while double die errors can fetch over $1,000, despite the coin's 1 cent face value. In the next segment, we'll turn back the clock to 1984 and uncover what makes that year's cent equally compelling. Stay with me, because after we unravel the 1984 penny's mysteries, you'll never look at a jar of pennies the same way again. Shifting gears, let's rewind 2 decades to 1984 and zero in on that year's Lincoln penny, an era when copper still reigned supreme and the tiny cent carried both literal and historical heft. You might remember 1984 as the year of Thriller and Apple's launch of the Macintosh. But for penny aficionados, it marked one of the last full steelback-free runs before zinc took over entirely in 1982. That means the 1984 penny you hold is 95% copper and 5% zinc, offering a warmer hue and heftier feel than its post-1982 counterparts. Back in the mid-80s, the U.S. Mint was in full swing at two facilities: Philadelphia, identified by the lack of a mint mark, and Denver, flaunting the familiar D. Together, they struck nearly 7 billion Lincoln cents in 1984, about a 60-40th split favoring Denver. Even with those massive mintage figures, a few quirks crept in. Dye polishing lines showed up on some pieces as faint hair-thin striations, and small numbers slipped through with off-center errors. But it's the rare dye varieties that really make 1984 exciting for seasoned collectors. Spotting a valuable 1984 penny starts with its look and feel. First, check the mint mark. A perfectly centered D should sit crisply below the wreath on the reverse. Then study Lincoln's bust. The ear, cheek, and jawline are prime real estate for double dye imaging, where you'll see ghostly shadows echoing the outline of a letter or number. Over the years, collectors have also discovered repunched mint marks, where the D was struck twice in slightly different positions. These RPMS coins can command several $100s in high grades. A well-preserved 1984 D RPM01D that's been graded MS65 by a reputable service recently sold for around $380, a tidy sum for what most people think of as pocket change. Of course, nothing grabs attention like a headline-grabbing auction record. In late 2021, a spectacular MS67 Plus RD Philadelphia specimen, completely flawless, glinting with deep red luster, fetched $6,900 at Stack's Bowers, shattering previous expectations for Lincoln cents of that era. That sale highlighted just how far condition can elevate value. A circulated 1984 penny is nearly worthless beyond its 1 cent face value, but when you encounter one in pristine, mint state condition, the sky's the limit. In more typical circulated grades, though, you're looking at values between 2 and 5 cents for most coins, bumping up to $20 to $30 for uncirculated MS60, MS63 pieces. Beyond the numbers, the 1984 penny carries a few fun anecdotes. Legend has it someone once discovered a 1984 cent plated in pure copper, but unusually shiny, almost like a proof strike, and turned out it was a misplaced proof planchet in circulation, now worth over $1,200 to the right collector. Then there are the stories of ghost cents, where die cracks on Lincoln's shoulder form a faint image that collectors swear looks like a tiny ghost, proof that, with enough imagination and a magnifying glass, any penny can tell story. When it comes to condition-based value shifts, the difference between a lowly circulated coin and a top-graded gem is astronomical. A well-worn 1984 penny with nicks and faded details is essentially worth its weight in 1 cent increments, unless you stumble on one of those rare era varieties. But snag an MS65 RB red-brown grade, and you're looking at a $30 to $50 valuation range. MS66 RD, full red, can climb as high as $250. Beyond MS67 RD, prices rocket past $1,000, depending on luster, strike quality, and eye appeal. Condition is king. If you're rifling through your change jar, don't overlook that 1984 penny with a slider copper glow or a mint mark that seems askew. Even minor anomalies, a faint doubling on the date, a hairline crack through the monument on the reverse, can transform an everyday coin into a standout find. For true enthusiasts, these subtle markers become the thrill of the chase. So next time you glance at a roll of cents, take a moment with each 1984 Lincoln penny. Is the copper bright and vivid? Does the D look a hair off? Could there be a whisper of doubling in the letters? A little patience and a loop can turn a common purchase into an unexpected treasure. In our final segment, we'll fast forward to 1995 and uncover why that year's penny deserves a spotlight of its own. So stick around, and let's keep mining for value in those humble cents. Let's wrap things up with a coin that's earned both admiration and confusion from collectors for nearly 3 decades. the 1995 double die Lincoln cent. Now, unlike the 1970s small date, which took years to gain its spotlight, this coin exploded onto the numismatic scene almost immediately after it entered circulation. For many collectors, especially those who started in the 90s, this was the coin that ignited their passion. And to this day, it remains one of the most recognizable and widely sought modern double dies out there. So what's the origin story? In 1995, the Philadelphia Mint struck over 6 billion Lincoln cents. During the die creation process, specifically during the transfer of the coin's design onto the working dies, an alignment issue occurred. One of the dies that was struck multiple times to transfer Lincoln's portrait shifted ever so slightly between strikes. The result? A now famous double die obverse that features very noticeable doubling in the word liberty and in the motto, "In God We Trust." This wasn't some hairline error or barely there anomaly. You can see the doubling clearly with the naked eye in many cases. That kind of visibility is rare and exciting. When word started spreading in mid-1995, collectors went wild. Coin roll hunters, hobbyists, and even casual observers were suddenly rifling through pocket change, hoping to catch a glimpse of that double trust staring back at them. The buzz grew so fast that coin publications and TV news programs began covering the phenomenon. You might say this coin made numismatics go mainstream for a moment. People who'd never thought twice about a penny suddenly found themselves squinting at Lincoln's face and flipping coins over at the dinner table. Now here's what makes the 1995 double die so interesting. While it's rare enough to be collectible, it's not so rare that it's completely unattainable. Experts estimate that tens of thousands of these coins made it into circulation before the error was caught. That's more than most double die errors. But thanks to the public frenzy and aggressive collecting in the 90s, many were pulled from circulation early, especially in higher grades. If you're trying to identify one, it's all in the obverse. You want to focus on the doubling in liberty and in God We Trust. The letters will appear thick with a sort of shadow behind them, especially noticeable in the T, R, and U. Unlike many other double dies where the effect is minimal or even questionable, this one is strong and easy to spot. That clarity is a big reason why it's so beloved. So how much is a 1995 double die penny worth today? In circulated condition, say XF to AU, you're looking at around $25 to $75, depending on sharpness. Not bad for a penny, right? But if you get into the uncirculated grades, especially MS65 and above, prices jump significantly. Certified MS66 examples often sell for $200 to $300. And if you have an MS67 with full red color and clean surfaces, that can fetch over $1,000 at auction. PCGS has only graded a handful in MS67RD, which means collectors compete fiercely for top-end examples. One of the highest recorded sales came in 2017 when a gorgeous MS67RD example sold for just over $1,400. That might not rival some of the astronomical prices we've seen with older key dates or gold coins, but for a coin from the mid-1990s, it's a serious number. And more importantly, it shows how even in recent minting history, incredible value can emerge from everyday currency. There's also a fascinating backstory involving counterfeit concerns. Because of the coin's fame, a number of fake 1995 double dies began appearing online and at flea markets in the early 2000s. Most of these were altered coins, where someone tried to mimic the doubling using chemical or mechanical means. But experts and graders can spot those instantly. Real 1995 double dies have doubling that's part of the die itself, not something added later. So again, authentication matters, especially if you're dealing with higher grade coins. And that brings us full circle. Whether it's the minting missteps of 2006, the elusive elegance of the 1970s, small date, or the bold doubling of 1995, each of these coins tells a story about history, human error, discovery, and the thrill of the hunt. For collectors, these aren't just pieces of metal. They're time capsules waiting to be found, understood, and appreciated. So the next time you handle a penny, take a second look. You never know what treasure might be hiding in plain sight.